Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, Canal Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And I'm here in the library again. A lot of people have commented on the binders behind me. Those do contain all the research for the different stories. And really, there's all the justification and all the reports that went into the stories that went into the books. What's in the books is really the meat and potatoes of what I've gotten and delineated out of those. So those may have more of my thinking behind some of the cases, but in reality the books have all the information that needs to push forward. So today, this is a missing persons video, and lately the channel has evolved, and I have a video that I put up every week about Skinwalker Ranch that's a review of what happened on Tuesday night. And I also have a video that I put up every week on missing 411 factual news. And it can be about anything that's in the news that's of a factual nature. And then twice a week we put up missing person videos. And in these videos I'm going to talk about cases that are related to missing 411 work. And we're also going to talk about some of the letters that have come in during the week that relate to our work. And that's important. And the reason it's important is because if I have 3 or 4 people that I meet with every week and I talk about these cases with, then I only hear the response from 3 or 4 people. But if I present it in front of 100,000 people, then maybe there's someone out there that is thinking much differently than we are that could provide a different twist on what I'm talking about. See, I'm not the kind of researcher who thinks I have all the answers. I know what I don't know. And that's the majority of what's going on in the world. But I do think that I have a pretty good handle on how to do good research. So there might not be a lot of things I've missed in the nuts and bolts on missing people, but there's a lot I don't know about what's going on this planet. And I think that some of you are having a difficult time accepting that it is outrageously different than maybe you were brought up to believe. So, now the first thing I'm going to talk about today is a case that I actually presented several months ago, many months ago. Sean McLaughlin from Ireland, 27 years old, disappeared in Grand Teton National Park on Tuesday, June 8, 2021, on the Garnet Canyon Trail, a short distance above Surprise Lake Junction. And there's a picture of the man that's missing. He's still missing. So Dave, why are you beating a dead horse and talking about him? Well, article came out that just blew my mind. This is what it says. It was June 13th, 2022. This was an article by Alicia Fieldstad. Heather McCoskey cannot enter Grand Teton National Park after she knowingly provided false information in a false report in the search for Mr. McLaughlin, officials said. Heather McCoskey, 40, knowingly provided false information in a false report to the search for missing hiker Sean McLaughlin of National Park Service said in a statement released Thursday. McLaughlin was last seen June 8, 2021, according to a missing persons flyer. McCoskey told authorities she had seen McLaughlin that afternoon or early evening, according to the Park Service's statement. She said she was hiking toward a rock that was a favorite jumping off spot for him to go into water. McCoskey provided a very detailed description of McLaughlin and stated she had a discussion with him in which he shared where he lived, where he was from, and his place of employment. Statement said the subsequent investigation revealed Mycoskie never saw anyone matching McLaughlin's description on June 8th in Grand Teton National Park. Other potential sightings of McLaughlin were in different parts of the park near Delta Lake, which he had searched on the internet before his hike. Witnesses told investigators that McCoskey fabricated her story to make sure search efforts for McLaughlin continued. The relationship between McCoskey and McLaughlin is unclear. Mycoskie's false report led to about 532 hours of search time directed in the wrong place, according to a Park Service statement. This wasted valuable time and could have been focused on searching areas of higher probability, and it cost the federal government approximately $17,600. Mycoskie was ordered to pay that amount to the Department of Treasury as part of a deferred prosecution agreement, according to park officials. Authorities are still searching for McLaughlin. Investigators have asked the public to report if they have seen any of the items that were with him, which include a red Apple Watch, a red iPhone 12 mini, gold wire rim glasses, a silver U-shaped pendant, and a white t-shirt. I've never heard of anything like that. In the thousands of reports I have read and reviewed, I've never heard anything close to that. Which brings up another fascinating question to me. So when she's telling a National Park police officer or a special agent from the Park Service all this information, she's giving a false report, which in police world, that's a misdemeanor. So why didn't they charge her? I can't think of anything more wrong than detracting searchers from where they should be and then costing them over $17,000. Why not prosecute her and just make the amount she has to pay back part of the restitution? I really don't get it. I don't get it at all. And here's why. Because if they hadn't charged her, what if she goes on another jurisdiction and does this? There's not going to be anything on NCIC about this. She wasn't arrested. She wasn't charged. I don't get it. I don't get it 1%. So, for what that's worth, I hope they find Mr. McLaughlin. Now, several of you sent me this, which I appreciate greatly. This was in the Smithsonian Magazine, June 13th, 2022. Beginning in mid-July, you can dial 988 for mental health hotline. The 3-digit code will be like 911, but for the mental health emergencies only. It said since 2005, individuals experiencing mental health crises in the U.S. have had to dial a 10-digit phone number to connect with someone who can help. Soon they'll be able to dial a much shorter code at time of crisis. Write it down, 988. I know that some of you are reluctant to call somebody if you're having a crisis. I've had people very close to me in recent times call me because they were in a crisis. We all have to spend time helping each other right now because our country is in a crisis. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. It's not normal. Gas prices at all-time high. Inflation at nearly all-time highs. Yeah, these are tough times, and they are affecting everybody differently. And because of that, we all need to be more patient. We all need to be better people. It's important. And this is a step in the right direction, so I'm really glad to see the 988 system come into being. Huck is sleeping right next to me, making some sounds, looking up at me, going, "Dad, what are you doing?" Talking into the air again, not looking at anybody. Sorry, Huck. Okay, the first letter. I'd forgotten this incident until just the other day while watching one of your videos. I realized what I'm about to relate seems bizarre, bogus, and hard to believe. I wouldn't have believed it myself had I not experienced it. The occurrence happened back in the 90s. I was attending school in Washington State. My sister and I shared expenses for a small house in College Place. An old friend of the family lived just over the Oregon border in Milton Freewater. She stopped by the house to visit my sister and I, and she brought a friend of hers with her. Don't recall what his occupation was or his name, but he was middle-aged, polite, and intelligent. We visited for a while, and he related a story that was extremely intriguing. He told us about his roommate, who was a young man that was a program writer for a very large tech company. One day he asked the roommate what kind of software he wrote. The roommate's reply was that he wrote AI, artificial intelligence software. He asked the roommate what it was being used for, and his reply was androids. No, not like the phone, like the robots. He explained that the technology had progressed so far that the generation of androids was so sophisticated that their skin looked real. So real you couldn't distinguish it from real skin. The roommate went on to say, in fact, that androids are so realistic they even had bad breath. I was chilled at the thought and somewhat excited given my like of Star Trek and Commander Data. But it was just a story which I had shrugged off and forgot about until, fast forward about 3 years. I'd moved back to Montana and was working as a landscape architect for a small reclamation and landscape company. One day my boss walked in and sat down at my desk to visit, as was his custom. He was excited that his nephew was going to be visiting from Texas. He told me that Jeff, not his real name, worked for a tech company and was a member of a tech consortium. He said he wanted to have Jeff stop in and visit with me due to my science background. A few weeks later, Jeff showed up. After visiting my boss, Jeff stepped into my office and introduced himself, and we began to visit. He told me he was part of a tech consortium that is made up of some very well-known computer and electronic companies, which I'm sure you'd be familiar with. He told me that their company is far more advanced than the general public is aware. He said the consortium controls and decides what tech is released to the public each year. He said the consortium controls the release of tech so that, one, the public isn't overwhelmed, and two, to control sales. You know as well as I do, companies like Apple release new innovations a little at a time to get people to buy the newest features of their products. Most folks are not satisfied unless they have the latest upgrades in tech. True. As Jeff and I talked, I recalled my conversation with the gentleman in Washington about androids. I asked Jeff if he had any knowledge about android technology. Without batting an eye, he leaned across the desk and quietly said, yes, and they are so sophisticated they even have bad breath. I'm telling you, David, I just about lost it. I just kept my cool and acted in awe and amazement because I was. Here were two gentlemen hundreds of miles apart on two separate occasions who had repeated the exact description to me. I don't believe there were many coincidences in this world. They're extremely rare. I'm 99.9% sure this was not made-up fiction. These guys, to my knowledge, did not know each other. Are androids walking among us? Are they perhaps holding positions in our government? We may never know. And if they do, what is their agenda and who built them? This actually happened to me. Do I believe it's possible? Yes, I do. Do I believe that our tech is far in advance of what the general public knows? Don't know. Where did this tech come from? I had a pretty good idea, and it ain't aliens. Just thought you might be interested. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. The battle is real. So, many of you know that when I left the police department, I had a master's degree in human resources and a certification in HR management. I was hired by someone who I took a college level class from that was an adjunct professor, and he hired me into his company. And it was a massive, big company. And I was immediately put in charge of HR for a huge engineering division. And I was their HR director. And what I learned right away, because I would sit in on all their high-level meetings, is that technology is extremely competitive. And to think that there's a consortium holding back technology, I am not calling anyone a liar. But I'm telling you, in our company, nobody would have held us back. We were competing against 10 other companies along with software, hardware, everything. So to think that somebody would say, okay, let's hold this back. I never saw that. And I worked for 3 companies over a long time span. And I can tell you that none of them would have ever thought about holding back tech. Somebody may be, and there may be a group that does. I can see how Apple would, especially when you look at their phones. And other companies had much more advanced cameras than Apple several years ago. And it's just been within the last 3 or 4 years that Apple started to improve their cameras on their phones. But even still, they're way behind others who have much more advanced features on their phones with cameras. So I'm sure Apple is holding it back. So all of the people who like iPhones will buy the next version because it has a better camera. So, interesting. There have been rumors in the UFO arena that this group was called the Vikings. They were a group of aliens that are supposedly here, that look like us, act like us, and have blonde hair and blue eyes. And they mingle about us. That's been a rumor around for 20 years. Could AI technology be this far advanced? I have no idea. I guess, maybe. Next letter. Howdy, Dave. Thank you for being a wonderful example of courage, truth, and integrity. Things are upside down these days. Thank you for the facts. This country was founded on Christian principles, and many founding fathers were Bible-believing Christians. In fact, the Ivy League schools, yes, Yale, Harvard, Cambridge, were started to train missionaries to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. How they have been turned upside down. Unreal. The big change was in the 60s when Eastern religions, with their gods of spiritism and socialism, were pumped into universities. On our dollar bill, at the top of the pyramid, is the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. In Eastern religions, the third eye, the pineal gland, it is really one's own personal portal to the dark spiritual world. Let us not be deceived. Interesting how much anti-true God stuff comes from the East, along with COVID and fentanyl. Anyway, Dave, just some thoughts, and we are sure to get back to Jesus, our Maker and King, praying His protection and comfort and strength on you like only He can do. Thank you. Appreciate that. Next letter. Hi, David. I'm a great fan of your 411 books, and I wanted to touch base regarding a couple of strange disappearances in my home state. I now reside in Western Pennsylvania, which has its own high strangeness. Oh, yes, it does. But these are a couple of stories my daughter and I have discussed recently. First, in the disappearance and subsequent discovery deceased of Mitzi Sue Clement in September 2018 from the Clingman's Dome parking lot in Great Smoky Mountains. Evidently, this 53-year-old woman, who was an experienced hiker, was with her teenage daughter returning from Forney Ridge Trail. The daughter wanted to go to the observation deck at Clingman's Dome and advised Mom she would meet her in the parking lot. That was around 5 p.m. on or around September 25, 2018. Thus, the point of separation. However, when the daughter reached the parking lot, Mom was nowhere to be found. As you know, fall is a time of exceptional beauty in Smoky Mountains. There are always large numbers of tourists and nature lovers in the area. Somehow, this mom disappears from within approximately 400 feet of the parking lot. It was raining at the time and skies were darkening. Perhaps Mom got turned around, but this was an experienced hiker and she knew she had almost reached the parking area. A massive search ensued and her body was found approximately 2 miles west of Clingman's Dome in the Huggins Creek drainage in the next county, Swain. I would ask you to read the accounts of this disappearance because it's so similar to other accounts in the 411 series. No idea what's happening, but something is. I couldn't find any accounts as to the condition she was found. Example, whether or not she was wearing shoes, clear rain park or she vanished in, etc. Very strange. Also disappeared in a cluster of missing people. Yes, there is a cluster there. I know that case very well. I've talked about it in the past. A couple of people, independently of what I asked or are just on their own, went to the daughter who lost her mom, who was with her mom when she disappeared, and asked her if she would be willing to talk to me and explain some things we need to know about the disappearance. Apparently the daughter went off. It's just a disappearance, leave me alone, I don't believe any of that crap and all of his weird hypotheses. And so anyone knows I don't have a hypothesis, I just live in the world of facts. But one thing I do is I respect her wishes, and I never have contacted her, and I wouldn't. And maybe someday when she has time to reflect on what happened, maybe she can pick up one of my books and see all the consistencies in the facts between when her mom disappeared and other people have disappeared. I agree. It is a very, very unusual case. The circumstances, how she was found, where she was found, not being able to find her way to the parking lot when she should have with no problem at all, being in a cluster of missing people inside Great Smoky Mountain National Park, disappearing on a trail within a half mile of another missing person in that park. Yeah, I have concerns. And I hope someday I can talk to the daughter. Hello, Dave. I'll be traveling to Estes Park, Colorado next month with my family and visiting some of the national parks in that area. Mostly just daytime hikes, panning for gold and glamping. It's like camping, but more comfort. I'll have my 8-year-old son with me. With the stories of people going missing, I'm naturally a little hesitant and anxious. Based on some interviews I've watched, you recommend that a personal tracker device be purchased or rented and that children walk in front of their parents when outdoors. Would you happen to have any other advice for venturing into national parks with a child? First of all, if possible, have more than one adult there. It's hard to keep your eyes focused on one thing all the time. The more eyes on children, the better off. Number 2, never rent a personal locator beacon. Could have been dropped on the previous trip and the transistor broken. You don't know. Have your own. Buy it. It's going to cost you between like $250 and $300. It'll last a lifetime. Probably the best investment you ever made. And then I would sit down and have a talk with the child. And I would have them carry a small backpack at 8 years old. Not a big one, just a little tiny one. And I'd put a little tiny bottle of water in it. And let them feel like they're having the experience. Put a bar in there for them. A healthy hiking bar. And explain to them that people disappear out here. And what you're supposed to do when you disappear. You're supposed to sit down and not move. Stay still. And somebody will come by looking for you. And when you hear somebody calling your name, you call back. And I'd also in that backpack put a whistle. And say, if you're ever lost or you're scared, you blow the whistle. I think that's where I'd start. But I would hope that you'd have another person with you, another adult. Do not take children on long hikes. They're not used to it. They can't do it. Take a series of short hikes. Keep them very close. Hold their hand. Use a lot of common sense. Make sure that they stay hydrated. Next up. Hello, Dave. I am still subscribed and watch all your videos. Thanks again for all that you do and bring awareness to the topic of mysterious disappearances. I'm writing because I feel compelled to bring up a few facts that always stick with me when I watch your videos. Well, thank you. I'm glad something is sticking. First, shoes. Always removed from the missing person. Not always, but many times. Every time I hear that line, I have a foreboding, sinking feeling. It always makes me think of when Moses was in the presence of the burning bush and was told to remove his shoes because he was standing on holy ground. Some religions remove shoes to enter a sacred temple or place. Very true. It could be that ancient rites and rituals on particular lands invited these entities in, and they have remained on their holy ground ever since. Secondly, throughout the ages, many ancient religious beliefs have expected sacrifice of both animals and sometimes humans as well. These entities that are worshipped are in need of the energy they receive from a sacrifice to manifest whatever the ritual was trying to bring to pass. Could cattle and other animal mutilations as well as human disappearances be because these entities are keeping their power supply up? The Bible says the life force is in the blood. In cattle mutilations, body parts are missing, blood is drained, and no evidence of a mess is ever found in the area. With the victims of these disappearances, do you know if the volume of blood in their bodies are checked? Well, I'll tell you that the vast majority of these cattle mutilations, there's never a necropsy. Farmers don't want to make a big deal about it, and they don't want the expense. It's a dead, move on. Now, have you ever heard of a holy cow? I'm serious. Do you know some cows are considered to have holiness and are revered? So could that play into why cattle are mutilated? Think about that. And then that's your assignment for today. Look up what parts of the world put cows in high reverence. Lastly, the mountains or mountaintops have been known since ancient times as where the gods live. The Sumerian and Babylonian gods lived in the mountains, and the Greek gods lived on Mount Olympus, and Moses went up on Mount Sinai to be in the presence of God. And those are just a few examples of mountains being in a place to approach of higher power. I mention this also because many people, when they are found, have been at higher elevations than they should have been. Maybe they were being drawn higher up the mountain. Could it be that those lands and mountains were dedicated to ancient entities through rituals that brought them to this plane and connected them to those specific areas? It is now their sacred area, and they hunt their land as any landowner would do. And the shoes being removed, could that be because they are standing on what is considered sacred ground and in the presence of whatever entity inhabits that area? Also, the removal of the shoes allows our bodies to earth or ground with the earth's natural negative charge. Perhaps being barefoot allows the body of the victim to fully absorb or receive the signal that is being created to enable the abduction. Just some of my random thoughts on these few points. Keep up the great work, Dave. The village appreciates you and all that you do. I also wanted to say that I enjoy the letters from other villagers. It's interesting to hear the accounts of others with unexplainable happenings. It's also reassuring to know that many of them have had odd experiences. It makes everyone feel that they're not alone in these incidents. Take care, and may the Godfather bless you. Thank you. And thank you for your letter. You brought up some very interesting points. Next letter. I just subscribed to your channel after watching your videos. I'd like to show you a post that I did on December 4th, 2020 on another YouTube video. By the way, I'm a pharmacist and a practicing family physician. Thank you for all your videos. I'm sure that you have saved many lives. One early morning, myself and my buddy were driving on our way to a hunting lease at about 4:30 a.m. Just so people who don't hunt and don't know this, hunters often lease a piece of property. It could be 100 or 1,000 acres in some woods. It could be a ranch. It could be something that only they can hunt. so they lease it for hunting. We were halfway there when all of a sudden I got a bad feeling, almost to the point of panicking. I told him that I knew that this was going to sound strange, but I did not want to go hunting, and asked him if he could turn around and take me back home. I am sure that he wasn't happy about it, but being a great friend, he turned the truck around and drove me to my house. Now, down in Texas, we were well armed, and both of us were carrying our fully automatic M4s with suppressors. We have our NFA stamps. Just so you know, it is not against the law in the United States to own an automatic weapon if you have a stamp from ATF that says that you can have it. They aren't extremely hard to get. You have to pay a monthly tax, and you have to go through an extended background, but you can get them. I know many people that have them. I carried one when I was on the SWAT team. They were a lot of fun to shoot. So, ammo, stamps, hunting rifles, food, water, etc. So we are well armed and fully able to be willing to respond to any threat. There should be nothing to be afraid of, right? Right? I can't explain what happened, but I'm glad that I listened to whatever it was. It was my inner warning. Probably my guardian angel. Regards, this person was an MD. Thank you. And I consistently have talked to you guys about that inner voice in your head. Now, whether you're walking through the woods and all of a sudden the hair on the back of your neck goes up, or hair on your arms goes up, or you get that sinking feeling in your stomach that something bad is going to happen, don't be stupid and ignore that. Probably eons ago, we had much more ability along these lines to recognize danger. But we still have some that we don't quite understand. Acknowledging it and reacting to it may develop that later. As he asked his friend to turn around, thank you, friend, for turning around, he may have saved his friend from danger as well. If just one person recognizes it, it might not mean anything. But let me relate that to something that you may know something about, Skinwalker Ranch. Do you know that people at Skinwalker Ranch, standing next to each other, one person has seen a UFO, and the person right next to him looking at the same piece of sky does not? Or, say in Travis's case, he had radiation burns, yet nobody else around him got radiation burns. And they went back later with some super highly sophisticated instruments to find out where the radiation was coming from, and none was detected. Except Travis's instrument that he carried on him to ensure that he wasn't exposed had gone off, and the effects on his body showed that he had been hit. So sometimes one person can be affected and nobody else around you can be. It's not that unusual. And I want you to just acknowledge that. Next letter. Hey Dave, good to hear you that I'm not saying that Bigelow is a bad guy or anything, but it seems pretty clear that he would be subject to their conditions, especially if NIDS was getting some funding from the government. Very interesting to see that the underground water flow at the ranch combined with elements in the ground providing extremely good conductivity. I'm no physics PhD, but I have a feeling there's a connection between this and the water granite thing about missing people. It would make sense why the Park Service keeps such control over their land and information about the missing. Can't have people bringing in EF meters, drones, and ground penetrating radar. I have no doubt that similar things would show up at Yosemite. Did you see how one of the experiments seemingly caused bad weather to occur? Lightning strikes? Sure seems to me like the use of the underground electrical system, either by the researchers or them, results in large electrical discharges into the environment. See the lightning detectors going off when they're disconnected from the battery from the ground. The show is providing us with a unique insight not only to the phenomena at the ranch, but into some of the strange consistencies you see in missing persons cases. So what this person is talking about is a couple of last year's shows. And they talked about water that ran under the ranch. And many of you don't know, but just north of the ranch, there's a large reservoir. One of the first times I ever talked to anybody at the ranch, I asked them, is there a large body of water very near there? And they just kind of looked, yeah. Why'd you ask? Well, they haven't had any missing people at the ranch, but they have had a lot of instances happen that are aligned with missing people research. That's the reason I asked the question. They also have a small stream that runs right through the middle of that ranch, yet the other properties around don't. So is that just a coincidence? And then the water in that ranch runs underground in spots, which brings up another question. When water flows underground, it makes large caverns underneath the ground. Could that have some association to what's happening? I don't know. So, that is the letter section for today. Before I go on to the missing persons, I just got to warn you. Do not buy my books on Amazon or eBay. You'll pay 3 or 4 times what you'll pay on our site, which are listed under the descriptions of the video. Please watch Missing 411 and Missing 411 The Hunted, our 2 documentaries. Watch them on Amazon. If you're outside the U.S., if you're in the U.S., you can watch them on YouTube for free. And in the last movie we made, Missing 411 The Hunted, we did put in a segment where a hunter saw this entity in a tree that you could almost see through. And since then, I've probably had 25 or 30 other people in the woods talk to me about the same thing, same sort of thing that they've seen before. And I'm very interested if anybody has seen this in the woods. So anyhow, the 3 stories today, you should see some similarities in them. And I hope that this can start to resonate in your mind about what's going on. I got some very disconcerting emails this week about people saying, Dave, those stupid older stories, they're irrelevant. Okay. If you think the older stories are relevant, you probably shouldn't be here. The reason being is at the end of this segment, it should be pretty obvious why they're important. But let's go. First case involves a young boy, 2 years old, David Marlow, disappeared May 5th, 1912 at 4 p.m. Why is 4 p.m. important? Because through our analytics, that is the time most people disappear. He, his mom, and his brothers and sisters were visiting the maternal grandparents, the mom's grandparents, at their farm, a half-mile south and a quarter-mile west of Lone Rock, Wyoming. Now, why is that important? I'm sorry, Lone Rock, Iowa. Why is that important? Because in the western part of Iowa, we have almost nobody that disappeared. But in the eastern part near the Mississippi River, near Minnesota, more disappearances. And in fact, where this case happened, there's 2 other cases very close by. So the mom is with Daryl, and Daryl is 2 years old. She puts him down on the front lawn and she goes in the house for 5 minutes. She comes back out and he's with 2 other smaller kids. Too small to say what happened, but Daryl's gone. Daryl Marlow, 2 years old, May 5th, 1912, gone from the front lawn of this rural farm, long ways from anything. So, here's Lone Rock. That's the state line from Minnesota right up above it. See Minneapolis up there? This is where it all happened. So, he disappears. Well, right away, the owner of the ranch starts calling neighbors, calls the sheriff. Within hours, there's 100 people there searching. And this ranch has been in the family for over 100 years. They know the area like the back of their hand. They spread everybody up and they start searching. Well, they tried to talk to the younger child that was with Daryl, and they couldn't say anything. They couldn't explain what happened. But the search goes on for weeks. After the first 10 days, the sheriff calls in detectives from some big cities in the area to help with this case. And the detectives make a statement that there is no way that Daryl is anywhere in this area based on the thoroughness of the search. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Some people said, well, maybe he got hit by a car, but there was no car heard coming down the road, no big dust cloud, nothing. So what happened? So, May 30th, 25 days after Daryl disappears, the police decide to raid a gypsy camp several miles away. They don't find anything. No leads, no nothing. So there's continuous ongoing searches. The family wouldn't give up. The grandparents that lived there felt horrendous that this child disappeared on their property. Now, if you don't know, a high percentage of these cases, kids disappear at their grandparents' house. And if they aren't at a grandparent's house, they disappear at a relative's house. It's a very odd conundrum. Now, August 17th, 1912, about 3 months after Daryl disappears, Peter Christensen is the grandfather of Daryl. And every day he'd go out and walk after he fed the animals. Well, 3 fence lines over 3 barbed wire fences and over a railroad berm, he came to a slough that he had walked by 100 times. 101st time, he found a body. And he ID'd the body by the shoes and the clothes as his grandson Daryl. So he went out and he got the sheriff. They came back out. They found out that the left arm was gone from the body. And they later found out that the body had 3 broken ribs. They couldn't explain any of this other than maybe predators. The coroner came to the scene, retrieved what was left, and made a statement that he couldn't determine the cause of death. There was nothing wrong with the skull. There was no skull fracture, no obvious injuries that would lead to death. Some people believed that Daryl was hit by a car by somebody and that his body was put back. That's crazy. That's nuts. Wouldn't happen. This area is in the middle of nowhere, even now. And back then, it was really nowhere. And then you got Minnesota that's a 25-minute drive away. There's so many places to hide a body that nobody would take the risk of carrying that boy and getting caught with that body and putting it back a quarter mile from the grandparents' farm. But I have a question. How did Daryl, and why would Daryl cross over 3 barbed wire fences and a railroad berm? Nobody could understand that. Well, the grandfather said that that body wasn't there earlier when they were searching. He flatly said it to the press. And the police also said it. So think about this, folks. What does this remind me of? It reminds me of cattle. And forget about the mutilation part. He wasn't mutilated. But the cattle are taken from ranchers' yards and they're put back in an area to be found. Darrow was in an area to be found. Whatever these things are, they could take this body and put it anywhere, probably in the world or in the universe. But they put it right back to be found. What's the message? Why are they doing this? And when the cattle are taken from a ranch or David is taken from a farm, what's the real difference? And he's put back in an area to be found. Point of separation, the mom stepped away and something happened. He's found in a slough, water, and he's found near the only body of water around that area. So, see that little body of water close to where he's found? There's nothing else like that in that area. Pretty strange. So, can I claim that I understand what happened? I don't believe that that little 2-year-old made that journey and wasn't found by searchers for days and weeks. Grandfather and the detective said he wasn't there. I believe it. But what's happening? Now, why is a 1912 case important? You know the profile points. You know my other cases. Is it starting to make a little bit of sense? Well, if not, let me tell you about another case. David Hamilton. David Hamilton, missing April 11th, 1955, 2 years old. Location on Lord Street, Cadishead, near Manchester, UK. The mother took the kids to a friend's house. Darryl's mom took the kids to the grandparents' house. David's family goes to the friend's house to visit. A couple of kids younger than David are playing in the front yard with David. The mom goes inside for 5 minutes. Sound familiar? The mother comes back out. David's not there. There's a big open field there next to him, and she runs out into the field yelling his name, doesn't see anything, doesn't hear anything, and nobody goes back, says anything back. They call authorities, and 80 searchers are there within 12 hours. Police dogs come in within 12 hours. And they start searching. Well, if you look, Glaze Brook is right next to the open field where David disappeared. And Glaze Brook runs down into the Manchester Canal, a shipping canal that goes up to Manchester in the UK, about 5 miles away. Keep that in mind. So he disappears. He's not found. So look at how close, and keep this in mind, Cadishead is from Manchester. It's really close. Keep that in mind. So they're in Glaze Brook. They're looking along the creek. They're not seeing anything. They put a boat in the water. They had dozens of police officers with grappling hooks, thinking the boys in the creek. They're not finding anything. And they do this for days. 10 days nonstop of searching the water because they knew he wasn't on the land. So 14 days after David Hamilton disappears, on April 25th, his body is found in that Manchester Canal, a shipping canal 2 miles from where he was visiting. Now, friends, in I can't even tell you how odd this is, what I'm going to tell you. But as I'm doing research on the case, I come across an article on April 25th stating that 4 people were found that day that David was found, and 3 out of the 4 had been reported missing in different parts of the UK. What? The next day it said 7 bodies in total had been found and 4 were missing. What? And they were found in different areas. Some in water, some in some of the strangest places you ever saw. I couldn't believe it when I read it. I've never seen anything like that before. But when you understand where David Hamilton disappeared on April 11th, 1955, it'll start to bring in some idea of why this is important. Now remember, canines were brought in. They didn't pick up a track. He disappeared near water. And he was found in an area that was previously searched. What's going on here? Well, when I wrote the book, Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, which was all about young people, predominantly males, disappeared and were found in water. Nobody ever saw them go point to point. Nobody ever saw a crime getting... Thanks, Hawkers. Nobody ever saw how the people got in water. They just ended up in water, deceased. Now, when I was writing the book, I included a series of stories from the UK. And Manchester, UK, had a cluster of disappearances. And they were calling that the Manchester Pusher. Here's one of the articles about it. What it says is that the Manchester Canal Pusher, a real serial killer or just an urban myth. And this was written July 20th, 2021. It says, for over a decade, rumors of a serial killer lurking down the canals of Manchester have been rife. However, there's yet to be any evidence of such a killer. So why is the Manchester Canal Pusher such a famous phenomenon? And is this real? Rumors of the Canal Pusher were born January 11th, 2015, when the Daily Star Sunday published a 2-page article headlined, Manchester Killer Canals. The article cited 61 deaths in the canalway, which stretches for over 10 miles through Manchester since 2006, though since then the number is estimated to have grown drastically to 85, though an exact figure for more recent years is unknown. The paper labeled the mysterious pusher as a serial slayer, while pointing out that it's extremely unlikely such an alarming number of bodies is a result of accidents and suicides. Accidents and suicides. Now, why is that important? Because none of these cases has anyone ever come out and said, I saw somebody get pushed in the water, or I got pushed in the water. Nobody's come up front and been public about it. Lots of rumors, but nothing public. And then all of a sudden, these people fall in the water and they drown. They don't swim. They don't try to get to a ladder to get out. In some of the canals, it's so shallow they could stand up. But none of this is happening. So what is happening? Well, that's exactly what was happening in Wisconsin, Minnesota, all these places I've written about before, Boston. It's all happened there. Always the same thing. Young men, healthy, disappearing in water. Yeah. The Manchester Canal Pusher. What do I think is happening? I have no idea. But I can guarantee that they even said it. They even said it in the article. It doesn't make sense as that many would be suicides and accidents. Okay. The next case. Bill Adler, 28 years old. Missing October 30th, 1977, Imogene Pass, Colorado. He lived in San Fernando, which is down in the LA area. He left on a driving trip, vacation, October 25th, 77. And he was going to go through Utah and Colorado. And his mom knew about his trip, and she was going on her own little vacation. So they were separated, and this is before cell phones. And so they kind of lost track of each other. Well, he failed to return to work on October 31st, and work started to look for him. And they reported him as a missing person. Well, in Colorado, a local person reported a car as abandoned on Imogene Pass to the San Miguel County Sheriff's on November 6th, 1977. They ran the registration, came back to a missing person, Adler. They entered the car and they found camping gear, a sleeping bag, tent, all the stuff you'd expect to find for someone spending the night in the mountains. What then makes sense then that Bill would leave that all behind if he was going to go on an overnight trip. So they surmised that he must have been on a day hike. Well, there was an 8-day delay in reporting because nobody knew Bill was missing. Nobody knew that he was even in that area. And that is a lesson for everyone. No matter where you go hiking, I don't care where you go, you tell people where you're going and when you're coming out. And you tell that person that if you don't come out and you don't immediately contact them, they are to call search and rescue. And don't be hesitant about doing it. That's important. Well, San Miguel County Sheriff's did a good job. They ran this in the local paper. Have you seen this man? Blah, blah, blah. And some local people on vacation stated on October 29th, they saw Bill with a light backpack on that trail. Okay, so that put him on the trail. And they immediately put out helicopters, ground teams. But remember, they were days behind on the search. If you were seriously injured on a trail and you hadn't been looked for the last 6-7 days, your chances of survival are slim. Make a long story short, Bill Adler was never found. So, there's where Imogene Pass is located, right near Telluride, Colorado. If you've never been to Telluride, you need to go. Telluride is a very cool little town, way up in the mountains. As you're going there, there's a town called Ouray, O-U-R-A-Y. You need to go there as well. Let me tell you about Telluride. Back in the cowboy days, the only way really in without riding your horse is to take the train. And the train started up on a bluff and you go down into this valley. And it was kind of a steep train ride down and kind of fast. And the conductors would be holding on while they were going down the hill, and they would say, well, first of all, Telluride back in the cowboy days had notoriety of being a wild place. I mean, really wild. They were known for prostitution, drinking, and a lot of wild conduct. So when residents of Colorado or from around the area would ride the train into town, the conductor's holding onto the rails around everybody, he would yell as it was screeching down the hill, "To hell you ride." And supposedly, that's how Telluride got its name. An old Colorado story. So that's Telluride. Now, this incident with Bill Adler happened on October 30th, 1977. Imogene Pass. Now, I've already done a story on the next thing I'm going to talk about just briefly. And that is Janice Ockerson. She disappeared November 6th, 7 days after Bill disappeared. 7 days and 9 miles away. That's right, folks. I don't have another story of a missing person at any time in any of that area of Colorado other than these two adults within the 7 days of each other and 9 miles. So, Janice was newly married, and her husband were hunting on Cutler Creek. And there's a very well established trail there. So, Janice, newly married, she was a big time hunter. She was a very established outdoors lady, knew her way around, probably better than most men. And her and her husband split up for a short time. After they split up, she was never seen again. Her husband searched incessantly for days for his wife with many, many people. San Miguel County Sheriffs were split between 2 searches at one time, which was odd. But as I stated, 9 miles apart from each other, Janice and Bill. I have a question for you. Is that a mere coincidence that these two people disappeared in such a short time frame from one another and short geography from one another? That's short period of time. So Bill, male 28, Janice, female 21. Pretty odd. Again, Janice's case is a very well-known Colorado disappearance. Bill's case, not so well-known and not so well talked about because there was such a delay in reporting, and a lot of people just slugged it off and said, well, there was such a delay in getting search and rescue on the ground. It just happens. Friends, I'm sorry. I don't believe in all that. I think that Bill still should have been found, and he never was. So, those are our cases for today. I got some emails from some of you, and I got one specifically that was outstanding. Somebody wrote to me and said, Dave, I really appreciate the part of the video where you talk about doing something nice for somebody. I was at the store the other day, and there was a disabled person exiting that was having a difficult time with some of their groceries. So I went over there, helped them unload it into their car, helped them into their car. I felt better about myself. That's what this channel is all about. Doing things for people. Stepping out of your comfort zone and being nice. We need more of it in society. Yeah, we're different. Yeah, we've got our beefs with some different politicians, but that separates us from animals. Humanity. Being nice. It'll make you feel better about yourself. And it'll put a smile on someone who probably needs it. Think about that. I'm humbled that you're here. I would be very grateful if you put this on your social media sites and said some nice things about the video. Maybe give us a couple thumbs up. And if God's willing, I will be back with another video. And you notice that the camera stayed relatively calm and wasn't jilted a bunch of times by Huck. That's because her little feet are going like this as she sleeps right now. So, let me see if I can show you a picture of her in full sleep. Oh, I woke her up. Sorry, gal. Oh, there's the big sigh. She's grown a lot in the last few weeks. So anyhow, thanks for being here. See you soon. Paulides out.